early on the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor, you may begin.
Thank you, Max. Welcome, everybody. It is Monday, February 7th, 2022. This is a virtual workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:00 a.m. on the dot. Thank you for being here. I want to thank all those that are watching virtually. Of course, we're conducting these meetings virtually out of an abundance of caution because of the pandemic. Thank you tuning in. I also want to thank those that have pre-registered to speak, and those today are Mike Strange and Walter Brittingham, two constituents, citizens of the town. Thank you for being here, and as you know, we will call on you at the appropriate times during the meeting to gauge your input on our topics. With that, I'd like to recognize that we have support documents that when they are available, they are embedded into the agenda. Go to www.cityrehoboth.com. On the right side and middle of the home page, go to the city portal and then search for the meeting date and click on that, and you will be able to find the agenda, the embedded documents that are available in there. We'll move on to correspondence, and we have identified two pieces of correspondence, one from Mike Strange and one from Tina Alexander. And those are, again, are embedded in the agenda, so there's no need to read those. You should be able to access them online. With that, we'll go to the city manager's report. Sharon Lynn, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, commissioners and the public who are on.
Good morning.
Just a note about the city's comprehensive development plan, an update on that. The draft has been submitted for PLUS, or preliminary land use service review, with the Office of State Planning Coordination. The city will receive initial comments from a variety of state agencies, including the Office of State Planning, DelDOT, DENREC, the Delaware State Housing Authority, and the Historic Preservation Office at a February 23rd virtual meeting, with official written feedback from the state anticipated to come in around mid to late March. More than 400 comments, now more than close to 500 from Planning Commission members, commissioners, and the public have already been received on CDP drafts. Public comment will continue to be accepted at a February 17th Planning Commission meeting and at public hearings to be held this spring. Just a note on last week's storm. 24 city staff members worked throughout the weekend of January 29 to 30, utilizing 9 plows and other equipment to remove the 12 to 16 inches of snow that we received here. Blowing, drifting conditions and wind chill temperatures presented some challenges, but by plowing while it was still snowing and for a couple of days afterwards, we were able to effectively clear our streets. I can't thank the streets department enough, the water and wastewater staff who helped the streets department. Everyone pitched in and worked hard over that weekend and throughout last week to make sure the city streets were cleared, and it really was very noticeable. I received many positive comments, and I thank the team again. Parking meters on Rehoboth Avenue are being removed in preparation for installation of the T2 Luke Cosmo meters. They've been ordered and they're on their way here. Parking meter software updates are ongoing and they'll continue through February. We also have ongoing maintenance with the stormwater outfall. Construction of the head wall adjacent to the 2nd Street Bridge has been completed, and restoration of the surrounding landscape will take place as soon as weather permits there. We expect the annual road maintenance paving will be completed this week. That was put on hold due to last week's weather. Striping on Olive and Maryland Avenue also remains to be completed as soon as the weather allows, hopefully this week. Bid openings for Phase 3 of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades will take place at 2 p.m. next week on February 17th. A pre-bid meeting was held February 1, and there was a good turnout there. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to any questions, I also, on behalf of the mayor and commissioner, Sharon, I'd like you to pass on to the Public Works Department, Street Department, that I believe they did do a fantastic job. You know, this was the first year that we implemented the parking ban through the Snow Emergency Act that we passed several years ago. And I thought it was fabulous the way it worked. It cleared most, except for maybe one car and one dumpster. It cleared the roadway to allow us to sweep the streets. And if you went on Rehoboth Avenue at any time following the storm and saw it was nice and clean, including the parking areas, because of the opportunity to plow around the car. So kudos to all them. Thank you very much. Jay, we'll go to questions for the city manager or comments. Commissioner Legree, please. Unmute yourself.
They did a great job on the stormwater. Do we have a cost on that? How much did that cost? The redoing the outfall that goes into the Silver Lake on the north side of the Bayard Avenue Bridge.
Yep. Mr. Williams is looking that up. Just if you can hold on 1 second, please.
And I know they ran into trouble. They had 2 lines that actually they had to dig up and replace. It was a mess. I counted 2 cars on Rehoboth Avenue that were snowed in and 1 on First Street in front of Freddy's. But other than that, things were clean on the morning after the snowstorm.
While we're waiting for those figures to rise up, Commissioner Gay, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for the city manager. Can you confirm the time of day on February 17th for that hearing with the Planning Commission and the CDP? You just mentioned a bid opening in the afternoon. So is the Planning Commission meeting in the morning?
Yeah, the bid opening on the 17th is at 2 p.m. The Planning Commission meets on the 17th. Hold on 1 second.
I have that down as 2 p.m. for the CDP.
Yes.
That's what I thought. I mean, I'm assuming you can do both, but I just want to make sure that it was in the afternoon and not in the morning.
Yes.
Well, they can both be held concurrently. That's
Okay,
no problem.
thanks for confirming. That's all I wanted.
Mr. Williams, you can
post
address
that when
Commissioner Legree,
the openings
please.
are.
Hey, Commissioner. Yeah, the total cost for the head wall replacement was just a hair over $34,000.
Oh, that's not bad. Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing no more questions or seeing no more questions from the commissioners, we'll go to the next item of business.
Mayor.
Commissioner Sernowski, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a technicality. You skipped roll call. You should just know for the record that all commissioners are present.
So noted. Thank you very much, Commissioner. We can give Commissioner Sernowski credit for that. Thank you. But I'd also like to identify some of the other staff members available. Max Hamby, Brant McCormick from the IT department in Womack, City Manager Sharon Lynn, Public Works Director Kevin Williams. And I can't see if Evan's here. Yeah, Evan Miller's there. And so I'd like to note their presence as well. With that, we'll move on to the city solicitor's report. Mr. Mandalis.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I don't have anything new to add today.
Very good. Short and sweet. We thank you. With that, we'll move to Commissioner's report. The only Commissioner's report identified is from the Boardwalk and Beach Committee. Jay, what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is if you want to, if you do want to give a report on anything, that's fine. But if it has to do with the design manual and Batia, let's wait until we get to old business A, if you don't mind for that. So go ahead in the meantime.
If you read my report, you'll notice that there's a note there about a coastal Delaware running festival that's going to take place on April 23rd and 24th, which happens to be the last weekend of April. And if you remember, there were something like well over 1,000 entrants, and the report or the advertisement says start and stop on the boardwalk for the running festival. But anyway, they give the you can look up the races and see what they are: 5K, 10K, half marathon, and see how many entries were there last year, and what the entrants are. And we've been talking about commercialization of the boardwalk, and I just looked it up, but the gross income on that race is going, if it's like it was last year, it was going to be $243,625. So that's a significant amount of money. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, we'll get to your wireless comments if you have them during the next topic. With that, we're going to go to the old business. Item A is discuss proposed changes to the small wireless communications facility design manual as referenced in Chapter 270 zoning of the Municipal Code, specifically 270-46.1.2 wireless communications facilities. And then we'll have a discussion to include value of inserting BATIA, best available technology, economically achievable language into the code in our design manual. What I'd like to do is take this in two parts. I would like to begin with a discussion and review of the design manual. And then after finishing that, I would like to move on to discussion of best available technology, economically achievable, and whether to include that in the design manual or not. The reason I want to do this in two parts is because we need to move this forward, the design manual, so that we can go to public hearing and adopt it, any changes, including with the ordinance. We need to move that forward. We can't continue to stall on it. And with that, we can afterward talk about BATIA, and if that's a go, that's fine, but it doesn't have to necessarily 100% parallel the design manual. So with that, we have Julie Elias from our consultant for the wireless from CTC. And Sharon, do you want to make any further introduction, or?
Well, I think
We'll
certainly Ms. Elias, her expertise and her consulting speaks for itself here with the commissioners, and I'm glad that she's joined us again today.
Thank you, Julie. Then we'll hand it over to you. If you don't mind, do a quick revision or summary of what the design manual is all about, that it is indeed separate from the ordinance, and also start off with an explanation of what the design manual version 2 encompasses. Why is it a version 2 dated February 3rd? Go ahead, Julie. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you again for having me back. To go straight into it here, as Mayor Mills said, we're going to review the design guidelines here. This document is separate from the ordinance, as was set up by your staff prior to CTC coming on. The real purpose of this document is to outline some of the design standards, the aesthetic preferences, and the technical preferences that you have for wireless installations in the right, small cell installations in the right of way within Rehoboth. This document, some of the types of things that this document regulates for small cells in the right of way is actually included in your ordinance for macro sites, for other sites on very tall towers, that kind of a thing, but specifically for small cells, especially with the FCC having a specific set of rules and regulations around those that came out only a handful of years ago. This document being separate also helps you to be able to address your preferences as technology changes, as the rules and regulations changes. And that's why having this separate is actually such an incredible boon for you. To answer the mayor's question as to why this is version 2, this is a very, very minor version 2, as opposed to the version that you may have seen back in December. There were a handful of very small changes that had already been addressed or mentioned by some of the commissioners or Rehoboth staff. And so in anticipation of going through this document here today, I went ahead and just made those changes instead of saying that, waiting until after this meeting to mention that, yes, some changes still needed to be made and that we were already aware of it. So just a handful of very small grammar tweaks, language tweaks, but generally speaking, the document here is identical to what you've seen in December and throughout the fall. Any
Thank you,
questions, comments
Julie.
up until now?
Julie, I think the best way to do this would be to start at the beginning of the design manual, lines 22, 23, and just go through it. You can give a brief explanation of anything that you like, but this is the opportunity for the commissioners to ask questions methodically as we go up and down the line. At some point, I'll call on the members of the public rather than wait to the end of it, perhaps, to get some comments. And Jay, do you have any broad comments you want to share with us on the design manual from the Boardwalk and Beach Committee? Because if there's specific items and line numbers, you can wait for that point. But if you have something broad, now might be the time.
No change. We went through it 2 meetings ago, and the last meeting we didn't discuss the any of the changes, and you can read about that in my report.
All right, thank you very much, Julie. So let's go ahead and start and go beginning to end on this the best we can. Commissioner Legree?
Have we definitely decided that we need to have all of the? I'm still not clear on the relationship between the ordinance and the design manual. After listening to Julie just now, it sounded like the design manual could be flexible, and I just want to clarify that. I'm sorry to break in before you get even started. Am I good to go on that?
Well, I'm not quite following you, but Glenn, maybe you can weigh in. You know, the design manual is more of a policy that's, by my mind, referenced within the ordinance, but it carries the force of law because it's referenced in the ordinance. Glenn, can you help explain there?
That's right, Mayor. The design manual is referenced at section 270-46.1 C10, and because it's referenced, as you said, it has the force of law. I was asked a question last time as to whether the commissioners would need to schedule a public hearing, conduct a public hearing for changes made to the design manual. I think the original thinking was perhaps if we had it in a design manual, there could be changes made to it that wouldn't require the same rigor of public notice and public hearings. But, you know, the more I've thought about it, it's useful in that it doesn't, you know, clutter the zoning code. But I do think because it is so zoning related and has the force of law under the zoning code, that it's best to adopt changes and amendments to it through the public hearing process. So it's outside of the zoning code, but because it's referenced, it has the force of law, and my advice is that you should go through the same rigors as a typical amendment to a zoning change when you change the design manual.
So I'm hearing you.
And that is the path forward that we will go, by the way. Commissioner Legree?
I think I'm hearing you say that there will be no way to change the design manual unless we go through an amendment procedure.
I think with respect to the design manual, because again, it's affecting property rights, probably best to use that process. As much as I'd like to say, we do it in other chapters that don't require public hearings and things. You know, outside of the zoning code, we're not always required to go through the public hearing process to adopt amendments. Again, though, because this one is so closely tied to the zoning code, I think that's right, Commissioner. There's no way to make a simple change to this.
Okay. That certainly ties us much closer to the consultant as we go forward. And I suppose that's a good thing. But it's not just something that can be done as we think we need it. There's a process, and that changes the whole attitude of the design manual in my mind. It makes it much less flexible. And but you do what you do. I appreciate your advice on that. Thank you.
Well, I'm fine with going that process. Less flexibility, maybe only because, but all we do is save maybe a month. Because otherwise we're adopting a resolution to go to public hearing, and then we're conducting the meeting on it. So I don't find it cumbersome at all. Julie, forgive me. I recall a note from you earlier saying that maybe the preference or sequencing might be better to look at the zones or aesthetic zones first or something. Why don't you suggest a route forward today?
Absolutely. And if any of the commissioners have particular items that they want to make sure that we focus on today, I'm happy to also zero in on those early on here. I would say that majority of the suggestions that we have made, and I can go into more detail, but I'll do sort of an overview here. Section 1 is about definitions. Most of those changes really are looking ahead towards the actual program of accepting applications and being able to have clear definitions of what different types of installations might look like. Section 2 on general standards for small wireless facilities. Those changes are actually very minor, and again, are intended to really reflect back what is in the ordinance already. One example, I think I've mentioned this in a previous meeting, the ordinance refers to the structure that any of these installations might be on as a wireless support structure. The design guidelines throughout have referred to those structures as only utility poles. And so you'll see throughout this document, we've gone through and removed the term utility pole because it might not be only a utility pole, and replaced it with wireless support structure and added that definition in here. So you'll see that sort of universally throughout this document as a suggested change. The next section about antenna and accessory equipment standards. A lot of these suggestions, and again with the equipment standards itself, those reflect sort of best practices that we have seen elsewhere to bring your design guidelines, your technical standards into alignment both with the federal regulations on minimum or maximum sizes of certain things, as well as best practices we've seen elsewhere. Again, these are flexible for your jurisdiction, for what you want to see, and your view sheds are different. Again, we can adapt these to whatever the preferences might be. Wiring standards, every change in that section is exclusively just switching from utility pole to wireless support structure. We added this section about battery backup and backup power and disconnect. Again, sort of a best practice to have that written in. And then we sort of start getting into some of the more meaty stuff with pole standards and preferences. Section 4 in particular, preferred small wireless cellular facility types. Those reflect what I believe the conversation had resulted in, which was a preference that an antenna would be placed in a circumstance where you would be modifying an existing location or co-locating on a structure that already exists before a carrier would go in and replace a pre-existing structure, be it a utility pole or a light pole or something like that. And then finally, the preference to add something new where nothing exists if they can demonstrate, which is what that next paragraph is all about, that they aren't unable to do so on an existing location or replacing an existing location. Then there's a much longer section here about setbacks. These are, again, some just sort of best practices we've seen in other locations. There may be other setbacks, I believe it's mentioned, that you might want to add here, which we are absolutely happy to do, or the setbacks that are listed here currently might be too large or too small, depending on the circumstances of, for example, schools or the sizes of your sidewalks, parks, etc. Again, these are flexible based on what makes the most sense in Rehoboth itself. Your section 6 is a very, again, looking ahead towards actually processing permitting applications, just a list of documents that should be required by every applicant for every application type when they go to submit their application, just making sure it's out there from the very beginning. And then sort of the meatiest section of all, the one that I'm wanting to dive into, as Mayor Mills mentioned the most, which is section 9, skipping ahead here a little bit, which is the preferred small WCF design zones. And this is, as I think I've mentioned at previous meetings with you all, the idea here is to create different zones in different areas of the city where you will have design standards that are pre-approved by you all, so that when Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, whomever comes in and wants to apply, there will not have to be a back and forth. Will this work? Will this not? They'll know already that as long as their installation meets these guidelines, it is likely to be able to be approved. It's not an automatic thing by any means, but it gives them a much better sense so that the conversation between Rehoboth staff, possibly us, presuming that we're helping with the application processing, and you all will look a lot closer to what you already know would be acceptable, rather than, you know, going back and forth to try and reach that compromise of what you're really hoping to see. Any questions, comments up until now? If not, I can dive into the 5 preferred zones.
Yes, Commissioner Gossett here. Just a question with regards to, you talked about the setbacks, their lines 282, et cetera. Are they at all tied in, or should be tied in, to relationships to the zone, as opposed to residential building, commercial building, elementary schools, or have you? Is there a correlation there at all?
At the moment, there is not, but that is a very good point and certainly can be implemented. We've seen in other locations that the zoning of the location, the property where this might wireless installation might go, may or may not consistently reflect the type of zoning that you're thinking of for those setbacks in the same way. If there are certain things, for example, I believe the first 2 setbacks about distance from a residential dwelling and commercial dwellings, that's line 283 to 286. Those certainly could make sense to be tied specifically to a certain zone, as opposed to just a residential dwelling or a commercial dwelling. Again, knowing that there's also sometimes mixed use properties where you have, commercial on the ground floor and perhaps residential above, it can get a little bit more complicated. Not that that doesn't still remain complicated if you tie it to a commercial dwelling or a residential dwelling without it being tied to the zones. I think it's really just a question of looking closely at the map, the zoning map within the city, and figuring out, does tying it to the zoning itself really encompass what you're trying to protect with the setback rule itself.
I guess I'm understanding that the zones are they tied to our zoning map or by use? Because I believe there was discussion earlier about a boardwalk zone and a commercial zone, high intensity, et cetera.
Yes, apologies. The preferred zones are not specifically tied to the zoning map, I do not believe. Is that right? Rehoboth staff, they had helped me put this map together, I'm not certain. We had sort of worked on an initial map intended to be for discussion, and that's, I guess this is line through 27, yes.
Glenn can help. Yes, the zones referred to in the setbacks and the design zones have nothing to do with the city land use zoning maps. 2 different things. Glenn, is that true?
Yeah, that's right, Mayor. They're 2 separate things. And as Julie said, I think you're trying to protect different things than typical zoning districts are set up to do. Here, I think, where you're regulating mostly things that are going to be put in the right of way versus things that are going to be put on private property. So back in section 5, when we're talking about setbacks and minimum distances from dwellings or from schools. That's different than a setback that you typically see in a zoning district, because you're talking about setbacks with a, on a private property. These setbacks are similar to, for example, like the liquor laws. There are certain restrictions on the ABCC issuing a liquor license a certain distance from a daycare or a certain distance from a school or from a church. That's why these setbacks are set up. And then the zoning districts that are set up within the design guide are similar in that they're set up to protect a different thing than a traditional zoning district is established for under the zoning code. I think Julie will, as we go through these districts, I think it'll become a little more clear.
Well, that's where I think it'd be prudent for us to go ahead and go through the design zones first and clarify that, and then come back to setbacks if you like. So Julie, I would say let's go ahead, Commissioner Gossett, if you're all right with that, we'll move
Yeah,
along.
just again, just trying to make it a little more user-friendly, and perhaps it's just the stand pack on section 5, maybe we could just use the phrase design zone setbacks as opposed to what have you, because it is confusing when people come in, their setbacks immediately come to the zone of commercial, residential, what have you. Again, just as you explained it, Glenn, that's fine, but I don't know that that is available to someone that is trying to interpret this, although they will be, corporations, but a resident trying to figure this out. Just trying to be as clear as possible. That's all that I'm trying to go through here.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. With that, Julie, let's go ahead and start on reviewing section 9, preferred small WCF design zones. That's in our support document version 2, lines starting at 318 and on.
Yes.
Talk us through this. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So these zones will be very familiar to you. I believe, I cannot remember which meeting, but I think it was either November or December. I had joined you all and I had walked you through an initial version of this, which I think it was in a PowerPoint format, though perhaps not in written out. So what we've done here is written out some of the possible ways that the different design zones can be understood. As you can see from line 327, the proposed zone map really breaks out pretty clearly the different areas that we're looking at different considerations for. Again, this is a preliminary ideation. It can absolutely change if there are different areas within these zones that need to be protected differently. But from this, you can see initially you have the boardwalk zone, which is in red. The boardwalk adjacent or buffer zone, which is yellow just next to that. You have your central corridor, which is along Rehoboth Avenue. Then you've got your commercial zone, which is primarily along Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues. And then the residential section, which is in green and pretty much encompasses everywhere else at this time. The actual text, as we start to go through this, is drafted from conversations that we've had in the past. The areas that are in particular in question are things that I am not certain if a consensus really was reached, but some of these, I think, I don't believe that there were many questions or things still to be discussed necessarily. So again, happy to go into detail on any one of these, but I'm just going to sort of start at number 1 and go straight through if that works for you all.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Excellent. So first, residential design zone, because I think this one's pretty straightforward and easy to understand. The order of priority for a carrier would be for them to first co-locate on an existing wooden utility pole. That was intended because in the residential zones, the vast majority of poles in your right of way at this time are already wooden utility poles. The idea being you would not be adding significant additional structures in your right of way in order to co-locate antennas on them. So first they would co-locate on an existing wooden utility pole. Conduit, all accessory equipment will be painted to match the existing pole. The second preference, if that cannot be met for any one of a number of reasons, such as the pole is not structurally sound enough to support the weight of the extra equipment, the next preference would be to replace that existing pole to accommodate the antenna and accessory equipment. Again, everything would be painted to match the pole, be a brown color. Would not, if prefer that color be very specific. That can be added here if it is intended to be a more of a general concealment as opposed to sort of a bright white sticking out, or white or metal on the side of a pole. You can leave that slightly more up to the carriers themselves. Then the third preference for this residential design zone would be a new pole. And that's broken into two different preferences. The first is if the installation would be on a block with existing metal light poles or decorative poles, the preference is to install a new decorative or metal pole that's aesthetically consistent with the existing poles on that block. The idea being, again, keep things looking as close to uniform on the street in the viewshed as possible. If there are no existing metal light poles or decorative poles, the preference would then be a new wooden pole would be installed in line with the other poles in the block, again, staying aesthetically consistent with all the other regulations within this document itself. Any questions or comments on that zone up until now?
Commissioner Legree, unmute yourself.
Julie, let's say that we decide 10 years from now to change all of our street lamps to decorative poles. And I don't know whether it's going to take 10 years to do that or not, but I'm going to work on it. Anyway, and if we decide to do that throughout the town, and a small wireless facility wants to, and they have to put a new pole up, but it would be the first decorative pole in that block. Are we up a creek, or can we say, yeah, if you're going to put a new pole up, even though there are no decorative poles there yet, we have an ordinance that we're going to change as we go along. Could we ever do anything like that? I can see just that very thing happening.
That is an excellent question. The way this is currently written, you, I believe, would have to have this ordinance be updated in order to reflect that intention and the desire for a new installation to go along that lines. Certainly is doable. Or there could also be a provision along the lines of, with future changes with streetscapes or current, sorry, words. Need another cup of coffee. Any proposed installation must also be aesthetically consistent with, publicly available plans for redesigning of streetscapes in that regard, like that. I know that there's discussion about Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues already, improving the sidewalks and streetscapes there. And so as those plans continue to develop, you could include a line here so that you don't know what the final plan is going to look like, but that any proposed installation needs to comply with what that will look like for those areas, something like that.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing in response to Jay's question is, when we firm up an intention to change poles, then we address and amend the code to reflect that, right? Okay. Commissioner Srnowski.
Yeah, Mayor, I think what Julie just suggests, we could have a line written now in the code. If decorative poles are present on a given street or zoned area, then the carrier would have to utilize it. We could put it broadly enough that if there's decorative poles, they need to comply with that.
Yep, exactly. And I think Commissioner Legree was also thinking ahead to, if there are not currently decorative poles, but the intention is in the not oh so distant future to install decorative poles or replace the wooden poles with decorative poles, if I understand you right. Is there a way to nudge the carrier, if they're going to install a new pole anyway, that it wouldn't be a wooden pole with what's currently there, it would be intended to match the future plan for that location? And again, just as you were saying, I think including language that they have to match what is currently there, or if there's a currently published intentional plan for what that will look like as time goes on, then I think you're covered in that regard. Otherwise, as the mayor had mentioned, the option would be, as you firm up those plans, you'll have to just come back to this and update the code to match whatever that current code would be.
Well, Julie, why don't you and Glenn work on updating it to match Commissioner Sernowski's recommendation?
I think it's already there, isn't it? Take a look.
We have some language along those lines, and perhaps we can look again just to make sure that it's as clearly as broad as need to be.
And that would be priority one, right? That would be our first priority, is that if there is an established decorative pole that's been approved by the commissioners pursuant to a streetscape project, our first preference would be to use that pole. Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Sharp?
Julie, just out of curiosity, when you use the term nudge the carriers, is that literal, or is there a stronger position that we'll be in?
Pardon, yeah, it's a very good question. I use the word nudge, it's, yes, generally speaking. The idea is you've very clearly outlined what your preferences here are, and we can continue to strengthen this to really reflect what you want to see throughout the city, in residential and in the more commercial areas, boardwalk, et cetera, zones, that I don't want to say directs, because you're not sort of ordering them, but you are creating guardrails towards exactly what you want them to look like. There could certainly be circumstances where exactly what you have listed here doesn't match what they can do for a particular location, installation, what have you. And again, those are strange circumstances, and my understanding is you don't necessarily legislate for the strange circumstances. You try and cover the most that you possibly can, right? Certainly we can also include something like a waiver process, should something like that need to come up. But the nudging is my gentle term, if you will, of creating guardrails towards what you are looking for. You're not saying you must do exactly this, only this, ever, because as you see, each of these zones has a list of preferences. It is more preferable this versus this versus this. One thing that could also be added, to exactly Commissioner Legree's point, if generally speaking, for the residential zone, your preference order would be 1, 2, 3A, 3B, as we have listed here. But in a circumstance where there is a particular street that is intended to, let's say, have all the utilities be undergrounded and all the street lights are going to go up and look decorative instead, maybe there's a 3C that is intended to say this preference preempts all the other ones in this particular circumstance, because we already know that that's going to be happening. We just don't necessarily know exactly what that plan looks like right now. Something like that, right?
Oh, I think we have residential design zone discussed and in front of us, subject to public comment later in this meeting. Sounds like we have a path forward. Any other comment from the commissioners on residential design zone? If not, Julie, let's go on to commercial design zone, please.
Indeed. So commercial design zone, this is section 2. This is primarily at this time intended along Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues. The order of priority from most preferable to least preferable design would first and foremost be on a commercial building rooftop and mounted in an enclosure the same color or design as the building. The idea here being you have buildings that are low enough that could potentially allow for an antenna to be placed on top of that prior to going on a utility pole or other new pole needing to be built in the right of way. That preference was also elevated in this list. Doing a quick search of the streets, many of the existing utility poles along Baltimore and Wilmington Avenue also are located very close to existing trees. And knowing that many of these small wireless facilities really rely on line of sight. So anything that gets in the way of sort of line of sight of the antenna will degrade the signal in that regard. It's more likely that a carrier will come in and say, we can't actually co-locate on any of these existing poles. Forget the structural needs, just because of the sort of blockage of the trees along these streets. It's possible, certainly. So first preference being, again, using the existing infrastructure in place on the building rooftops there. Second preference, just like in your residential zone, would be to co-locate or attach an antenna and the equipment on an existing wooden pole. Secondarily, on a replacement wooden pole, again, replaced because the existing pole needed to be replaced in order to accommodate the antenna and equipment. And the fourth preference then would be on a new wooden pole for exactly the same reason. I think Commissioner will agree, this is sort of the point you started with the residential zone, where there are primarily wooden poles up and down these two streets at this time. But if the plan, as I know is already in the works, being discussed, of redesigning along both of these streets, perhaps a new wooden pole is not the first preference prior to a new metal standalone or decorative pole along those areas. So this is one of the two major sections that I thought would likely have some conversation about preferences and what maybe should go first or second in that regard. Thoughts?
Any questions on the commercial design zone parameters? It looks like a hit, Julie. I want to move on to Central Corridor Design Zone.
Absolutely. The Central Corridor Design Zone, in my opinion, is the easiest to understand. There's only one preference, which is consistent with, I'd say, the policy or what is already happening in Rehoboth, which is that small wireless facilities can only be co-located on the support structure in the median along Rehoboth Avenue, not on any of the smaller decorative poles along the actual sidewalks on either side of Rehoboth Avenue, that is, closer to where people will be walking and so forth. We did a very rough preliminary analysis, not with any sort of authority, but from our engineer's perspective, because of the width of your street of Rehoboth Avenue, that is, there's no reason why an antenna, small cell antenna placed in the median would not be able to perfectly cover from either side to either side of the street. So there's no reason why you would have to go, to the sidewalk areas as opposed to in the median. With that said, the actual design preference in that area is to replace that existing decorative light pole to accommodate concealed antennas and equipment, just as already happened at least once, if not twice. I don't know if the Verizon installation was still in the works or not. I know that that was something that's being discussed a number of months ago, but I believe there's at least one AT&T pole that's down there in the median close to the bandstand or Carlton's. Gives you a sense of exactly what we're talking about there. Aesthetically consistent with the decorative light poles that are already in the median. All equipment and antennas would have to be concealed within the pole, and it will match the existing pole in shape, design, color, material, and the light fixtures on the replaced pole will match the existing light fixtures, again, keeping those aesthetics consistent up and down the street. Up and down Rehoboth Avenue.
Thank you, Julie. I noticed, or I guess I'm just seeking confirmation that there are no written definitions for these zones, such as the Central Corridor Design Zone, no written definitions. However, the definitions to me are incorporated within the design zone map. Correct?
At this time, yes. I think, we can certainly add those in. I think my intention at the time was to discuss the actual design preferences and discuss the zones sort of concurrently, and presuming that we were all in accordance with that, we could actually add in more specifics of what those zones encompass. But if the map works, that's certainly a lot easier.
Well, and I'd ask you to maybe take a look at the map and see if it's definitive enough to define the design code zones, that if something was happening at the border of a design zone illustrated on the map, is it clear enough so that we can avoid any challenges by the vendor? So
And I looked at that a little bit, Mayor. Thanks for asking. And I do think it would help if we could define at least the central corridor and the commercial, or the commercial corridor a little bit better by, street references and maybe, distances off the street, and then everything else we know is in the residential corridor. And the boardwalk, I guess, is pretty easy to define. Let me talk with Julie about that. We might be able to do a little bit better job of defining those. So those ones that fall right on the edge, it's clearly established what zone they're in.
I don't want to lose the map because I think that's still very useful visualization, but let's
Well,
go ahead.
I agree, Mayor, and perhaps depending on the quality of the resolution of the map, it might be sufficient just to go with it. But let me work with Julie on that.
Thank you. Any further comments by the commissioners on Central Corridor Design Zone? Again, we'll go to the public shortly. Sounds like we have our path forward there with the extra homework to do. Julie, will go to Boardwalk Adjacent Buffer Design Zone.
Actually, if it's all right with you, Mayor Mills, I thought I'd actually jump ahead to the actual boardwalk design zone, because I think that will also help to delineate what we mean by the boardwalk adjacent zone. Also, because I expect the boardwalk adjacent zone will have quite a few more comments than the boardwalk zone itself.
Very good. That's the design zone number 5, starting at line 383 in the support document.
Exactly. So boardwalk design zone, section number 5. The boardwalk design zone would be anything on the boardwalk itself. Very clearly outlined in that regard. The buffer zone we'll get to in just a moment, but the actual boardwalk zone is anything that is on the boardwalk, or perhaps on the commercial building alongside the boardwalk itself there. The design preferences along there is that all small wireless facility installations within the boardwalk design zone will not deviate from the predominant pattern and size of existing adjacent structures. So this is intended in particular to protect the small decorative poles that are so iconic for Rehoboth that go up and down the boardwalk in that regard. And to Commissioner Legree's point, should in the future those light poles be intended to be replaced uniformly, will also immediately transfer over to whatever that future installation look will also be. For the replacement of decorative poles along that east side of the boardwalk, the replacement decorative pole will match the existing pole in shape, size, design, color, and material, and all antennas and equipment must be concealed within the pole.
Yeah, when I first saw this in reference to the east side of the boardwalk, it gave me great pause because you know that I favor leaving them alone, but they are just so nice looking in such straight line, clean, etc. But as I read further, it indicates basically that they have to be the exact same design. They can't be a bigger diameter. They can't have a bigger base, etc. So if that's the case, and they would not be able to deviate, then I would be satisfied with this. But again, my goal is that they don't change in aesthetics whatsoever.
The second piece of this is concerning those tall floodlights that overlook the beach volleyball court. Again, the installations on those handful of poles there must be minimally aesthetically obtrusive, and all equipment must be mounted on or inside the pole. In other words, no carrier can install an equipment cabinet of any kind at the base of the pole on the boardwalk itself, taking up extra space there. And again, those, anything that is mounted on or inside of the pole is also subject to the other technical specifications about pole mounted equipment that is outlined earlier in the document as well. In other words, the minimum mounting height above ground, those kinds of items.
We've already got one existing recreational light pole that has antenna on top by AT&T that, if you will, violates this rule. But I guess there's nothing that we can do to require them to change it retroactively, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Then I wanted to go back to defining the boardwalk. While you're considering definitions, Glenn and Julie, this is one that interests me. Where exactly is the west edge of the boardwalk? And I think in our smoking code, we have a certain definition that goes all the way back to the street ends, if I recall. But defining the east side of the boardwalk is fairly easy. The west side may be a little more challenging. So I just throw that in the mix. Anybody else?
Yeah, question if I may, just in that, along those same lines, Mayor, with regards to possibly a map on this, we have the volleyball poles there now, which are not on the boardwalk. They're just a little bit east of the boardwalk, correct?
Julie, I'm not familiar with what volleyball poles are. There are
The lighting poles, the light poles.
Four recreational area lights that are on the east edge of the boardwalk. Yes, that
So
are not in the dunes.
But they located physically on the boardwalk or
Yes.
adjacent?
Four.
Yes, they are.
Okay, all right. So this would, in defining that, then could someone come along and request in the dunes, actually, if that's outside of the boardwalk buffer? Just curious.
Then, as best of my knowledge, that is east of the DENRAC construction line, and DENRAC would not allow even us to put any lights east of the boardwalk.
Should that be mentioned in this anywhere, or perhaps, say a 2-foot buffer on the east side of the boardwalk to define that better or something? Just curious.
Yeah, it's food for thought, but since DENRAC controls it, I don't even know if we even want to offer the possibility of somebody challenging that. Glenn, if you give some thought to that, please.
Mayor, can we chime in here?
Mayor, if I
Yes,
could
ma'am.
just clarify,
I
this
just
is
can't
Kevin
see you,
Williams.
Sharon, go ahead.
If I could clarify just a couple things. One, the volleyball lights are physically on the boardwalk. They are not east of the boardwalk. And then there are several of our decorative lights at the south end that are east of the boardwalk, but inside, the sand fence line.
Explain, are those volleyball lights?
No, the volleyball lights are the ones in front of the beach patrol headquarters.
I call them the recreational light, because
Sure,
the
they're tall.
recreational area is what they light up.
Correct, the ones that are really tall.
Refresh our memory in more detail where these lights are on the south side of the boardwalk that are east of the boardwalk.
Evan's going to pull the Google map up and kind of show a couple.
Okay, so
Correct.
yeah,
See
you're
them
right.
there.
So technically they are east of the boardwalk.
Right, they're on their own pedestal mount east of the boardwalk itself.
Well, and
That's my concern. It's just defining it so that, it's not a loophole or what have you.
right. The interesting thing here is that the concrete square that they're sitting on is part of the foundation that goes down, and then it goes underneath the boardwalk as part of the foundation system that holds up the wood boardwalk. So, Glenn, according to Commissioner Gossett, we would want to make sure that that is incorporated within the definition. Good catch, Commissioner. Anything else, Kevin or Sharon? Nope.
Nope.
Anybody else, commissioners? Commissioner LeGree?
Those poles set on those beams, those concrete beams. Julie, if let's say AT&T comes along, and they will in about 2 or 3 more years, and they're going to say our metal box is all rusted out and we got to replace it. And in 2 or 3 more years, or whenever that metal box deteriorates, there's probably going to be enough new technology that they could make things a lot smaller. Is there any way we can ask them to when they replace things to update it, to bring it up? Is there any way you can write that in, or are we just set to have that metal box for the next 50 years?
You absolutely can. If I remember correctly, and I want to make sure I've got the exact language. So what I'm about to say is not the exact language, but I will find that and make sure to send that to you. Any application, any permit application has to comply with the existing design guidelines that you have. So as technology changes, as the ability to integrate cabinets more compactly and perhaps within the pole itself, depending on if it's a wood pole or not, what have you, as that changes and upgrades, as the code, as your design manual code updates as well, when AT&T comes in and applies to replace that cabinet because they say it's out of date or what have you, they want to put a new radio in, that installation is going to have to comply with whatever your aesthetic, your design manual guidelines at that time also say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Anybody else? Oh, we saved the best for last, Julie.
Something like that. So the boardwalk, section 4 starts on line 363. The boardwalk adjacent or buffer design zone. And again, I think it's already been mentioned that defining exactly where the west edge of the boardwalk is already something that we're going to have to make sure we do a little more specifically. But as written right now, first pass, if you will, the boardwalk adjacent or buffer zone extends 30 feet from the west side of the boardwalk. For all street ends from Hickman Street south to the end of the boardwalk adjacent or buffer zone extends 90 feet from the west edge of the boardwalk. All small wireless facilities to be located in this buffer zone must meet the following design preferences, starting with, if there's an existing utility pole within the zone, the preference is to co-locate the antenna on the existing pole. And again, conduit, any accessory equipment is intended to be painted to match or concealed to match the pole. If there's an existing utility pole within the zone that would need to be replaced to accommodate the antenna and equipment, the preference would then be to replace the existing pole to co-locate the small cell installation. The idea, of course, there being that you're not adding further poles and objects, if you will, within the right-of-way, within the view shed. After that, if there are no existing poles in the boardwalk buffer zone and there is a decorative light pole, the preference would be to replace the decorative light pole and to accommodate the antenna and equipment. The replaced pole will match the existing decorative pole in shape, design, color, and material, and all antennas and equipment must be concealed within the pole. Note, an increase in height or width of the decorative pole to accommodate the concealment of the antennas and equipment will be considered on a case-by-case basis by the city code enforcement officer. The idea there being that on the west side of the boardwalk or in that buffer zone, if there's an existing decorative light pole, that pole could be replaced to be aesthetically consistent with the other decorative poles in the area, especially those along the east side of the boardwalk. But because it's not within that uniform line on the east side of the boardwalk, if that pole needed to be replaced to be slightly bigger, slightly taller or wider in order to accommodate hiding all of the equipment within the pole, that would be more acceptable than to simply have it, slapped onto the side of the pole and very obvious for anybody who goes in that area. The final preference listed there, if there are no existing utility poles or other vertical structures, the preference would then be to install a new wooden pole in line with other utility poles on the same block. discuss.
Any comments?
Yes, I have a question or comment with regards, I understand what you're doing on this regards, but two questions. Just curious, the rationale for the change of depth at Hickman Street, how did that come about?
Absolutely. I had spoken with Rehoboth staff about that, recognizing that south of, I believe it was Hickman Street. I will admit that I personally did not choose Hickman Street, but the idea was that I acknowledged that south of a certain point, the boardwalk, the depth of the sort of dune area between where the street ends and the edge of the boardwalk is increased. And so a 30-foot space might not be able to accommodate the entirety of that particular area, which is why it was increased to the south. In terms of the actual selection of Hickman Street itself, that's
fine. That's understandable. And then the other thing, we do have a number of commercial buildings within this buffer zone, if you will. Would there be any consideration to, in the priorities there, if you go back and look at line 345 and 346 from the commercial design zone, that talks about on a commercial building rooftop and must be mounted, etc. So there are existing rooftop mounting antennas along that buffer zone. So just thinking about it, would that be a first priority for existing buildings? And we've got quite a few high rises along there that are private property or what have you, but could consider that in this boardwalk adjacent buffer zone as a priority. Comments, thoughts?
Yes, that certainly could be considered. The only comment I would make in terms of the high-rise buildings, we would not necessarily be able to put this on the rooftop because the small cell antennas are really, as I had mentioned before, line of sight. And so if you're trying to increase coverage or capacity in these areas, they really do need to be closer to the ground in order to be able to provide the coverage in that regard. But when you have buildings that are maybe 2 stories off the ground, maybe 3, it's certainly a lot more feasible. In theory, you could see sort of closer to like where Funland is, along the edge of there, facing again away from Funland. I'm not saying Funland is the right place to put it.
Sure.
It's just the first one that came to mind.
Just a consideration for aesthetics. That's all. Comment.
Absolutely.
Any other commissioners receptive to that? Okay.
It sounds reasonable to me.
Good. Of course, you're at the mercy of the business, but putting it in there would dictate that the vendor at least goes and contacts the vendor and eliminates that or receives it as doable. Anybody else? Anybody have any, Commissioner Legree?
Nothing we've talked about so far has been outside the guidelines of aesthetics and location. And all of our discussions have been within those guidelines. So I can't see how we've even approached any violation of the Ninth Circuit. I think we're in really, really good shape. And I thank the consultant for keeping us there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else before we go to public comment?
I just have one other question, if I may, and that's
Yes.
back on line 329. It says, as the intro to the design code zones here, it says, otherwise demonstrate why it is technically infeasible to meet the most preferable designs. What is that process? Who administers that, or who determines those issues? Is there a form, or is there, so it's equitable to all, or just curious how that works?
Absolutely. So that exactly how that process might work will be worked out as following the design code actually being put into place and getting a better sense of the scope of how much, if at all, the City of Rehoboth would like us to help manage the overall permitting and application process. Assuming, for the sake of answering your question, that CTC would be extremely involved with that process, actually perhaps accepting applications on your behalf and processing for completeness and accuracy in that regard. What that typically would look like is there would be a number of examples that we could provide to the applicants for what that might, what kind of documentation might demonstrate technical infeasibility. Usually those indicate, for example, if we're talking about commercial buildings, a letter or email directly from the commercial building owner saying that they will not allow an antenna on their building. Or it could be, if we're talking about more technical infeasibility, it could be a coverage map from the carrier demonstrating why a different or more preferred location will not meet the coverage or capacity goals that they're trying to reach by installing this antenna where they're trying to install it. Where they would show you that, the pre-existing wooden utility pole down the block isn't going to be able to provide coverage, 500 feet down the road closer to the beach. Where they're really trying to increase that coverage, something along those lines, and that would be much very clearly outlined in that regard.
Gotcha. I know in the initial proposal, I guess there was discussion about CTC managing the application submission review approval process via a web portal. City Manager Lynn, is that still under consideration, or is that part of the process, or is there any decisions been made on that?
It is still under consideration, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, any other comments from the commissioners on the totality of the design zone sections within the design manual? Commissioner Legree?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Gossett. We need to get the text and also what's going, we need to firm that up. I was just looking at the map and we do need to have the text. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to the members of the public. We are focusing solely on the section of the proposed changes to the design manual that deal with the design zones. Mike Strange, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am, and I have no comment, and I think the job was well done by Julie and her group, as well as the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Walter Brittingham?
Ditto on Mike Strange. Thank you. You guys are doing a good job.
Thank you very much, very much. Julie, how do you want to proceed with taking a look at the rest of the design manual? Do you have another priority section you'd like to look at, or can we start at the beginning and just flip through page by page?
I did not have any particular section for the rest of the design manual in terms of priorities. I'm happy to, if any commissioner has one that they'd like to sort of call out to start with, happy to go there first, but otherwise happy to go straight from the top and just sort of go line by line in that regard.
Well, I don't think there's going to be too much comment, or I don't expect too much comment since we have gone over this before, but let's start at page 15 of 34 of support documents. Section 1, the entirety of section 1. Does anybody have any questions? You can always go back to them if you need be, but otherwise, I take your silence as that we are relatively supportive of it so that it can move forward. Section 2 starts on lines 93, 94, has to do with general standards for small wireless facilities. Are there any questions on section? Section 2, general standards. Hearing none, we'll go to the next. Starting in line 125, Julie, there's a second section 2.
Yeah, I just noticed that as well. Should be 3.
Accessory equipment and standards. So that's section 3. Okay. Antenna standards. Are there any questions on section 3?
And section 3 is broken into 3, 4 subsections, if you will, on antenna standards, equipment standards, wiring standards, and the backup power and disconnect, as I had mentioned earlier.
Looks to be pretty much self-explanatory to me. Any questions, commissioners? If not, we'll move down to line 210, which is new section 4, correct?
Indeed.
Pole standards. Existing poles, replacement poles, new poles. Julie, you do have a bullet there with a comment about line 257.
Yes.
Referencing decorative poles. Do you want to explain?
Pretty much, that was a placeholder, really a note to self almost, that following the implementation or clarification of what the design zone preferences might look like, that a second look at this bullet D on decorative poles might need to be reworked or looked at once again, following greater confirmation of what the preferences were for decorative poles in different areas potentially of the city. What's there is absolutely acceptable, just was not certain whether or not we would need to take another look. So I wanted to make sure that there was a flag to remind ourselves to go back should we need to.
All right, thank you. So essentially I'm going to put an X through that. Sounds good. Section 4, which is really now line 267, really becomes section 5, I believe. Preferred small WCF types. Any questions? And section line 282 is section 6. New section 6, setbacks. Patrick, did you want to go back to any questions in setbacks after having concluded the conversation on design zones?
No, I just think perhaps if between Julie and Glenn, if you can just look at that, perhaps rename that as maybe design zone setbacks, so it's a little less confusing as to zoning setbacks.
I thought perhaps, Commissioner, because setbacks do have a special meaning within a zoning code, perhaps just naming it separation requirements or something like that, rather than just not even using the word setback.
Even better, thank you.
Sounds good. No further questions. Section line 297 is new section 7. List of submittals. That's referencing the chart. Line 303, new section 8. Approvals. Section 9, new section 9 on line 350. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Legree, go ahead.
No, I'm waiting for 9.
Okay, line 315 on is new section 9, prior approved designs. Go ahead, Commissioner Legree.
The statement on line 328, 329 is really close to best available technology. And I think you could add about 4 or 5 words in that and you'd have it. Go ahead. That's all I want to say.
Okay. No further comments. Section 318 on is new section 10.
Just a question there, if I can, Julie, just for, again, wordsmithing here, but we start out with preferred aesthetics, and then in line 320, we have aesthetic preferences. And then on line 328, the next page, we say a preferred design preference. So just kind of keep it consistency. Yeah.
All right, so we're at section 10, which of course is the design zones, and that brings us to the end. Are there any further comments from the commissioners before I go back to the public? Hearing none, I'll go back to the public specific to all of the design code absent the design zones. Anything in the design manual, but for design zones, because we've already discussed design zones. Mike Strange?
No comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Walter Brittingham?
No comment.
Walter? Thank you. So I think we've got our marching orders there. At this point, it looks like if we wanted to, we could go forward to public hearing on both the proposed amendment to the ordinance as well as the proposed amendments to the design manual. Of course, the next conversation is going to deal with BATEA, best available technology, economically achievable. That is a topic proposed by, Mike Strange, who's on the camera with it or on the audio with us.
Mayor, excuse me, Mayor, before we get to that, if I ask one other question with regards to
Okay.
just when, and I support going to a public hearing on this, but if I'd ask the solicitor that, to my knowledge, and I certainly could be wrong, do we have any other design manuals that exist in the city?
Well, we have the residential architectural, I can't remember the correct terminology, the architectural guidelines for residential construction.
Right, but that does not have any force of law as we know it.
That's right.
So my thought process here is just like, since really this is the first time that we would introduce this type of reference material, what have you, that when you design the resolution to introduce this for the public hearing, if you could be more specific as what the purpose of the design manual is and how it's to be used, and if it has the force of law, or just exactly give it a purpose so that there's a stake in the ground as to really what this means.
Sure. Yep, I can do that.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Well, and understand, I'm not expecting to go to the next meeting and adopt a resolution to go to public hearing. I want this to come back to us one more time with the proposed changes that we talked about today.
I'm fine, but I just thought this was an appropriate time to kind of put that out there.
That's fine. I just want to make sure everybody understands there's still a process and a timeline, and we still would have a couple months to go before we would go to public hearing. Anything further? So we're going to talk about best available technology, economically achievable. I think, my position on it, I was reluctant to accept it, especially based on CTC's response that we asked them, that they suggested that it was not appropriate at this time. And I think most of the other commissioners at the last meeting were receptive to it. And let's start off, Jay, if you don't mind refreshing our memory on any shared view of your Boardwalk and Beach Committee, and then we'll go to the Environment Committee, see if they have any input, and then I'll direct us from there. Jay?
Yeah, we discussed it again, specifically best available technology, economically achievable, that part of adding that to the design manual. And the members of the committee went back and reviewed the streams of the two meetings where we talked. They reviewed Julie's memo. They reviewed all of the Mike Strange and Mike Trejos, the submissions that they made. And a lot of new things were brought up, but the committee decided to stand behind inserting best available technology, economically achievable, into the design manual. Now, we specified that this only could accommodate anything that was okay from the Ninth Circuit, which is aesthetics, reasonableness, location, and specified in advance. And they wanted to do that. And so that's where I am. And this is not a part of anything that we talked about, but we have since received another letter from Verizon, and I mean, I'm not sure where they're all headed, but we have only discussed aesthetics, location, and reasonableness. And we've never discussed anything but that. Certainly not dictating the type of material that the telecommunications company would be wanting to use in the facility. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Jay. I did watch your Boardwalk committee. It was kind of interesting because there seemed to be a theme about can we manage Batia? And I wish there was a response or an answer from the committee, but obviously there was not, you know, and somebody else said if it cannot be effectively managed, then they're inclined to leave it out. Some other questions posed by your committee members were, can we afford it if it's expensive to administer? And I think those are good questions, but they were deficient in answers to that.
Well,
Also, I know another commissioner asked, and they also asked at the meeting, you know, well, what harm can it do to include it? So anyhow, I appreciate you getting together with your committee and discussing it further. Commissioner Sernowski, I'm not sure you had a meeting since then, but has your environment committee taken a look at anything further in making a recommendation or not for including BATEA in the design manual or ordinance?
We've not met again since, but I'll go back to the last meeting where we did discuss it. And we didn't take a formal vote, but many members of the committee wanted to have it included and thought that was helpful and it wouldn't do any harm too. Pretty broadly.
All right, thank you. How I'd like to proceed now, I guess, is Julie, hand it back to you to start with. I was considering having you read your letter or just reiterating what your position is on including Batia or not. Then I'd like to go and have Glenn read the letter from Verizon that we received just Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening that Commissioner Jay Legree referenced, so that we have some potential talking points there. Julie, go ahead, please. You're muted. You're muted.
How would you like me to proceed? Would you like me to read through the letter? Happy to do it that way, or can sort of summarize the majority of the points.
Either way, either read it or just summarize the bullet points. Again, what we're addressing is there value in including BATEA language in our design manual and or ordinance? Go ahead, Julie.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to mention that my colleague, Sean Thompson, who's a technical, has a lot more technical know-how on all of this as well, has joined me for any further questions that we might have on the topic as well. Generally speaking, CTC's position on including Batia or BATEA in the ordinance or design guidelines is one of hesitancy. To start with, from the research that we've done and from conversation I think that has been had, this Batia is a principle that really does exist primarily in environmental policy to determine most efficient and cost-effective methods to minimize pollution. When you look at potentially trying to implement a new program incorporating that in a new industry such as the wireless industry, one of the first questions really that we would have is, should we include, if we include this into the ordinance, what is the best available technology economically achievable to do what? There's a question at the end there, which is that, you know, a carrier must use the best available technology to accomplish a certain goal. You know, in the environmental policy industries, that's intended to be minimize pollution. When we're talking about the wireless industry, that it could be, is it to meet aesthetic preferences or designs to be the least visually obtrusive? Is it to maximize throughput, to minimize interference? There's a lot of different ways that, or a lot of different goals that PATEA might be implemented to achieve, but that hasn't really been made clear this time. It's not really clear what that implementation would serve, how that would serve Rehoboth by implementing it. What exactly are you looking to control? And indeed, the argument that we made in our memo and continue to stand behind is sort of, if the goals really are aesthetically driven or visually driven, I think that the rules and regulations that we've been working on with the design manual and the ordinance revisions are really intended specifically to protect exactly those things. So it's not really clear what, in addition, implementing a PATEA program might assist Rehoboth with in those regards. Not to mention, of course, the question, as Mayor Mills mentioned, of who would in fact manage that program.
Thank you, Julie. Glenn, at the last meeting, you were asked a couple questions and shared your perspective. Can you, first of all, remember, and if you can remember what you said, do you want to offer anything from your perspective?
Well, I guess in some ways, it's a little bit of a reiteration of what Julie just said. I think that defining, if there's going to be any sort of inclusion of best available technology, economically achievable, I think the most critical point is to define in what context it's being implemented. From what I heard Commissioner Legris say, and he's been very clear all throughout that he's focused on the Ninth Circuit and how aesthetics are something that the city is able to regulate. So if it's PATEA in the context of regulation of aesthetics, that's one thing. Best available technology, economically achievable to meet the aesthetics objectives of our code. If on the other hand, it's PATEA to meet, as Julie said, the best coverage levels or the best throughput, I mean, that's a whole different area, and it gets into the technology side of what the carriers are doing. And I think that the technology side is something we have a much more difficult time regulating versus the aesthetics. So I think that it's all about context. And so if you're not, so my concern that I expressed last time, and again, I'm not voting here, but something Julie said in the memo that rang true with me is you might have unintended consequences. You might implement PATEA, but if the provider uses PATEA in the context of technology, you might not be achieving the aesthetic goals that you're trying to implement through the regulations. So I just think you need to be really careful about how you define what objective you're trying to obtain through PATEA.
Thank you, Glenn. Late last night, almost 8:00 p.m., we received a letter from Verizon issuing their opinion and perspective on this topic. It was forwarded to us, so obviously it was way too late to embed in the agenda and have it available to the public and the commissioners via the city website. But I believe it's of value. And Glenn, would you have it in front of you?
I do, Mayor.
Would you mind reading the content of the Verizon response to us? And that was from Bonnie Metz, who has participated in our past meetings with us on as a representative of Verizon. And the subject matter is titled Verizon's Comments on BATEA. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'll also mention that since this meeting has been proceeding, Joe Davis from AT&T sent an email saying that he concurs, that AT&T concurs with these comments that were submitted by Verizon. So in Bonnie Metz's submission, she says, Verizon is submitting these comments on the proposal to include best available technology, economically achievable, PATEA, language in Rehoboth's wireless ordinance and small wireless communications facility design manual. Under federal law, the town has the authority to impose objective, reasonable, and non-discriminatory aesthetic requirements for small wireless facilities. However, it does not have the authority to mandate the specific type of equipment that a wireless provider must use in deploying its network or dictate the type of services provided. A municipality cannot inappropriately evaluate or second guess a provider's technology choices, network design, or service objectives. And then she references see third report on order entitled Accelerating Wireless Broadband Deployment by Removing Barriers to Infrastructure Investment. That's the FCC regulation 18-33. And she gives some more reference docket numbers there. And then provides that reference. It finds that local jurisdictions do not have the authority or expertise to dictate the design of a provider's network and must not restrict the type of services a provider wishes to provide. Furthermore, Verizon agrees with the town's consultant, Julie Elias, wireless siting manager and project analyst, CTC Technology and Energy, that BATIA is not applicable to wireless services as distinguished from BATIA in the environmental context where a technology is employed to meet a clear environmental objective and regulatory standard. In the wireless services context, various services can be provided through a variety of technology solutions depending upon the service objectives and provider. Example, 4G versus 5G services. As discussed above, local jurisdictions do not have the authority to dictate the equipment or types of services offered. As such, the imposition of BATIA standard is improper in the wireless services context. For these reasons, we do not feel that BATIA requirement in the wireless ordinance and design manual is appropriate, and it should not be included in the town's requirements. Rather, the town should focus on reasonable, objective, and non-discriminatory aesthetic requirements. To that end, Verizon remains committed to continuing its work with the town to develop and achieve its aesthetic criteria for small cell deployments. And I should note there's a footnote that references some other authority back to the FCC reg that was noted. And it says there, furthermore, local jurisdictions do not have the authority to require that providers offer certain types or levels of service or to dictate the design of a provider's network. And she gives another reference. It says, instead, our effective prohibition analysis focuses on the service the provider wishes to provide, incorporating the capabilities and performance characteristics it wishes to employ, including facilities deployment to provide existing services more robustly or at a better level of quality, all to offer a more robust and competitive wireless service for the benefit of the public. And that reference came from a 7th Circuit decision called Bastion versus AT&T Wireless Services.
Mayor, I'd also
Thank you,
add
Glenn.
that,
How I'd like to proceed now would be to, excuse me, open it up to the commissioners to ask any questions of CTC or Glenn or state an opinion before we go back to the members of the public on this topic. And I want a reminder that my goal is to advance consideration of amendments to the wireless ordinance and consider amendments to the design manual as soon as we can. So I don't, depending on what the outcome is of BATIA, I don't want that to hold up the public hearing for that because I've read about other, nothing. So let's open that up to the commissioners to ask any questions or comments.
Mayor, may I add one thing?
Who's this?
It's Sharon, Mayor.
Oh, Sharon. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that we did receive that last night.
Yes, we received that a little before 8 p.m. and that's why it's not embedded in the agenda. That's why I asked Glenn to read it.
Correct.
With that, are there any commissioners that want to comment?
Mayor?
And the goal here obviously is to determine whether or not to pursue BATIA or to leave it go for now.
Mayor,
anybody?
Can you hear me?
Commissioner LeGree.
I'm not sure they've ever listened to our discussion or read the design manual. I'm just, it's like we've been shot at and missed. But
you're talking about Verizon.
Verizon, and now AT&T jumped on, and I don't even think we have no intention of telling anybody what kind of equipment they're going to use, what color they have to paint it, except if it's a color that's not aesthetically acceptable. But the 9th Circuit, and Glenn referenced the Seventh Circuit, I think. I wasn't even aware that they had, but the Ninth Circuit tells us exactly what we can do. And that's what our consultant has been doing. And I continue to think that somebody needs to know what's available aesthetically. And I think as long as we keep the consultant, she'll know, but we need to be flexible. And that's all I'll say right now. Thank you.
Mayor,
Thank
can you
you.
hear me?
Sharon and then Commissioner Sharp.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that at 9:05 this morning, I did receive.
Sharon, you muted yourself, or somebody did.
Can you hear me?
Sharon, you're muted. Yeah, you were
She shouldn't be
reverberating.
I just wanted.
1 minute.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Mayor, while they're working out that technicality, can I comment on Commissioner Legree's comments?
Go ahead, Glenn.
I just want to reference back to, he referenced line 328 in the design manual that says all small WCF installations must meet the most preferable design preference for that zone or otherwise demonstrate why it is technically infeasible to meet the most preferable design. And I think what he was getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner, is that we're already starting to implement what is sort of like BATIA as far as it goes to aesthetics. So it goes back to this question of, are we really just looking at aesthetics and trying to implement in the ordinance a way to ensure that the best technologies concerning aesthetics are implemented? Or are we looking at something completely different, which is the technological side of it? Because I think what the utility providers are saying is, you can't tell us what radio frequencies, or I don't even know the terminology, but you can't tell us how to implement our technology. You can tell us what to do with aesthetics, but not how to implement our technology. So I still think there should probably be a conversation amongst the commissioners as to whether you're talking about BATIA in the context of technology or BATIA in the context of aesthetics.
Yeah. May I answer, Mayor?
We'll go back to Jay. Go ahead, and then we'll go to Sharon and then Commissioner Sharp.
Yeah, Glenn, I thought that when I read that the second time and Patrick was talking about it, I thought, well, I'll bet Glenn could add enough to that sentence, enough limiting definitions to make it acceptable. But aesthetics is technical. It's highly technical. And it's the way they get these devices smaller and smaller. And that's what Mike Strange keeps telling us. So I think it's doable. I think we could do some wordsmithing, or Glenn could, and make it work. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Well, I got Sharon, Commissioner Sharp, and Commissioner Czerniawski. Go ahead, Sharon. Are you there?
I'm on, Mayor.
Good. Go ahead.
Sharon, please stop unmuting your computer.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Okay, now you're good.
Just wanted to add that at 9 a.m. This morning, we did get a message from Joe Divis from AT&T responding to Bonnie Metz's email from Verizon agreeing with that. So AT&T agrees with that position.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Sharp?
I just wanted to say what Glenn and Commissioner Legree have already said. And for me, I certainly don't have any qualifications around the areas of best coverage or throughput or service objectives or equipment. So if what I thought we were wholly focused on were really the items that relate to aesthetics. So my question was really going to be for Julie, that if our goal is aesthetics only, what would be your recommendation to remove your hesitancy? If our goal, which I think you mentioned earlier, what is our goal? If the goal is aesthetics, then what removes your hesitancy? Julie. You're on mute.
Julie, you're muted there.
So this is Sean. I work with Julie, and let me step in. If you were to implement some type of a BATIA, what you would likely need to do is construct some type of a document that really outlines what this means and how you would evaluate the proposals coming in. One thing you would likely want is that when you do get a proposal for some type of installation, that upon review, we'd be able to definitively determine whether this is compliant with your rules. So you could construct that through some type of outline a document that's not within your ordinances, call it a design manual, call it your own BATIA, but you would need to construct something, on your own that would have these rules. So you could do that. You could create some other document and have a set of rules, and it would be, addressing aesthetics. And in your ordinance, you would reference that. But it doesn't really matter. It seems to me it doesn't matter if you call it BATIA or design manual. This is your aesthetic set of rules. So you could alternatively address that right within your ordinance. I think that's what Julie's been working with you all. So I think it seems to me that you're adding another level of complexity by not being as straightforward as either putting it in your ordinance or putting it in an aesthetics document that you reference. But this BATIA doesn't exist. It's a concept, right? So you've got to breathe life into it, which means what are the rules around it? How is this evaluated so that when eventually you get a proposal, you can compare that.
Thank you, Sean. Commissioner Charnowski?
I'm good, Mayor. Commissioner Legree and Sharp made the points that I had.
Very good. Back to Commissioner Legree, please. You're muted, Jay.
Susan and Patrick were ahead of me.
Did you all raise your hand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you just haven't done it electronically. That's why I missed you.
Yeah,
Who
we
was
have.
first? Who was first?
Susan, you can go ahead.
No, you go first.
Well, I just, I understand that the concept here about aesthetics, but I go back to a question that Commissioner Legree asked and commented about, in 10 years, we've got a rusty box and we want to replace it. And I think, Julie, your response to that was, well, it depends on what the design guidelines say and at the time. So I'm not clear as to, is that being reactive or proactive? To me, the BATIA or some definition of that is proactive, that we know what is going up there so that it's not, stuff that's been out there in inventory for a while they're trying to get rid of or what have you, but it meets the aesthetic guidelines. So kind of help me understand your response to that the rusty box situation that Commissioner Legree described and how it could be replaced depending on our quote guidelines, but at the time that happens.
So I'll take this one too. Your question is, should a service provider install something soon and in some time in the future, this becomes degraded to a point where it's unacceptable, right? And how is that dealt with?
And the idea being in the future, there's better technology that Rehoboth would like them to go towards, as opposed to the original box simply being replaced like. Is that correct?
Basically, yes, that's the question.
Yeah, so remember that this BATIA, as it relates to small cells or wireless infrastructure, it doesn't exist, right? So you would need to create it, and probably one of the things inside of it would say, well, the finish needs to be of some quality, et cetera. Probably also within your ordinance, you would need to say that it needs to be kept within some type of working order, and there could be some description there. But the point is that whether that's within a BATIA construct or whether it's simply in your ordinance would have the same effect. So if you chose to build this BATIA, it's the same as building your aesthetic rules.
So do I
It
understand?
doesn't exist.
I'm sorry, do I understand you to say that those rules, as you've described them, finishes on boxes or what have you, are currently not part of the design manual that we have in front of us?
Julie, I don't know if you can answer that. But what I'm saying is it's definitely not in BATIA because the BATIA for this doesn't exist. So whether you chose to address it through your ordinance or you construct this BATIA, you're doing the same thing in that you would need to come up with your set of rules.
And to piggyback on exactly what Sean is saying, there is language in the existing design manual that we've been working on to address exactly that. Questions of finish, questions of being in good working order or whatnot, but the question of whether or not this idea of BATIA would be applied to a future installation in some way to reevaluate what would be acceptable or not, exactly as Sean was saying, it doesn't exist, BATIA, that is. So it would have to be constructed in order to complement in some way existing regulations that we're already working on to do exactly that, which is to say what it has to look like, what the finish must be, and so forth. So I guess, it's a question of sort of either redundancy or additional work when you're already doing that exact same work within the design guidelines that we're working on.
So am I hearing you say that there are additional specifications that are going to be put into the design manual that we haven't seen or what?
Other than the ones that we've already discussed today, that there weren't further items that were intended to be added. Again, if there are other items that are important that you do not feel have been covered or covered sufficiently in the design manual, of course, there's more that can certainly be added at any time in this process before we go ahead and take it to the public. I think the bigger point in terms of whether or not this goes into the design manual that we're currently working on, or whether an additional definition and document is created to outline this idea of BATIA as it relates to aesthetics, you can put it into the design manual that we're already working on crafting, or you can craft yet another document and definition and program and idea around BATIA. It's just a question of where you're going to put it. It does not exist currently in BATIA because BATIA doesn't exist. So I can't currently address the concerns that you have because the document, the idea, the concept does not exist in this industry, in this context.
But I'm getting really confused here. I feel like I'm a dog chasing its tail in this discussion. But isn't what we're talking about in the design manual what's important to us in the future to have applied relevant to aesthetics? So if those are the values that we have, without regard to what you call it, if you call it BATIA or whatever, haven't we already agreed upon the value that's important to us? And now all we need to do is name it or include it in a bit of a more robust way. That's why I'm asking you, Julian. I'll ask the question again. When you talked about CTC's position is hesitant, would that remove your hesitancy?
I think when we talk about the hesitancy is really just about what is BATIA and what are you trying to do. I think we've discussed here a lot more clearly that the intention of including BATIA is for aesthetic purposes.
Right.
With that in mind, I think Sean had touched on this earlier as well. The question changes, the hesitancy, if you will, changes. It's really a question of adding an additional layer of complexity to create a definition and really clearly outline what is BATIA in this context and how will it function looking forward or currently, especially in a way that might be distinct or different from what we're already working on with the design manual changes. I mean, I suppose the hesitancy is really a question of redundancy more so than a disagreement as to whether or not it should or shouldn't be there, with a focus on aesthetic preferences in that regard.
I would add that it's not just redundancy what we're talking about. So BATIA includes some concepts like the BAT is the best available technology, right? But you need to go through a process where you look at all of the available technologies, you evaluate which one of these meets your criteria. And typically there's some other criteria they use, like, has this been used in large scale deployments also? So there's these thresholds that you need to work through. So if you wanted to have something that you wanted to put into your ordinance now, you can just put it in your ordinance. If you wanted to construct this BATEA, this is a much larger process that becomes a much larger document and methodology. And so this would take a considerable amount of time and effort for you to go through that BATEA process to say the equivalent, which is, you know, the enclosures need to be maintained showing no rust, right? That can go in today into your ordinance if you choose so. BATEA will take some time.
Thank you, Sean. Commissioner Gay, my apologies. I did cover up your hand. You were actually first some time ago. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually just have a statement and then a question. I guess the statement is, you know, I want to do whatever we need to do to keep from having to come back to this every year. And, you know, since it does require public hearing and all that, it already has been a time-consuming process over several years and might continue to be with technical advancements. And I don't know if it's possible. So my question was going to be, have we seen any sample, could we see any sample language? We've been talking about the BATEA concept, but we haven't actually had any sample language to review, to accept or reject or change. But what I've just learned in this discussion is, no, we don't. It doesn't exist. We have to create it. And, you know, I guess I would like to see, so basically BATEA is not one thing, it's customized, right, for our particular situation. But if we could look at what that might be so that we have something to actually talk about rather than just a concept, then we could look at, does it have the teeth to deal with the continuous updating of technology and aesthetics that might change over time? Does it protect us there so that we don't have to come back and change the code every year? I guess that's my question.
Julie, Sean, any response? Oh, you're muted, Sean.
Sorry about that. I have seen a couple examples of BATEA installations or documents, and we'd be happy to share that with you. The ones that we found, honestly, were hundreds of pages long. It's usually adopted by, you know, sometimes they're federal governments. I saw one by Canada for limiting the pollutants in mining water. There's others for air pollutants and how they are, you know, go through a process of determining what is the best technologies, et cetera. But these are enormous efforts and not limited to a locality, you know, so it may be something that trade associations take on, something that can be shared with many cities, kind of thing. So they're robust, and I can share this with you. Your question about how does this stay current? The way that we have seen other jurisdictions go about this is that they will adopt an ordinance that refers to some type of guidelines that are allowed to be updated over time without having to, you can determine how formal a process it needs to be to stay updated. You can achieve the same thing and not have to be under a BATEA umbrella.
Okay. I'm just not sure we can, because since this is part of the zoning code, I think what I heard Glenn say earlier was that since it becomes part of the code by reference, that any change would have to go through that formal process. And maybe there's nothing we can do about that. I don't know. I just asked the question.
I think what Sean's referencing is that, for example, if there's some federal standard and we put in our zoning code that we were going to adopt that federal standard as it's amended from time to time, I think we could probably do that even under a zoning code. also to Sean's point, we did some research and we did find references to BATIA in the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. But as he said, I mean, that was after months and months of public comment period and rulemaking, and they're significant, thick documents. So it's a real undertaking. I think he's right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Legree and then Commissioner Sernowski.
Julie, I think you know where we're going, and I think you know what we're trying to do. We're trying to protect you in the future from some telecommunications company telling you to take a hike when you suggest that there are better antennas available, or there are smaller power boxes available, or there are smaller switches around, and on and on and on. What we would like to do is have words in this design manual that gives you that protection and gives us that protection without having someone tell us to take a hike. They're going to put the old gray boxes back up because that's what we described in our design manual. Is it possible, and maybe not even call it BATEA, call it something, and write that in. You had a great start on line 328 and 329. I thought maybe Glenn could do some wordsmithing, but you'd have to say what you felt would protect you. And that's where I think we're headed. And the Ninth Circuit really sets our guidance, sets our ropes up. So, okay, I've said what I needed to say. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you want me to respond to that?
Yeah, you can.
Just briefly here, Commissioner Legree. Yes, exactly. And the language we have in the design guidelines to that point is intended to get along those lines. When it comes to protecting you or us from a carrier coming in and saying, take a hike with a particular type of antenna or a particular type of box or whatnot, I believe that's exactly what we cannot actually tell a carrier what they can or can't use. We cannot say you have to use this radio versus that radio. What we can tell them, though, is that in this jurisdiction, if you want to put something up on a pole, it has to look like this. It has to meet these size requirements. It has to meet these color requirements in that regard. And so if a carrier comes in with any model of an antenna, for example, I think one of the things we have in your design guidelines now is that no antenna can be taller than 3 feet tall. So if they come in with an antenna that's 3 feet 1 inch tall, we can go back to them and say, you can't put this in because it does not meet the maximum height requirements. It has to be shorter than this. But in terms of, a carrier coming in and saying, we want to put in Samsung antenna A versus, CommScope antenna B, we can't tell them, no, you can't use this one. You need to use this one because this one's more advanced or more up to date in that regard.
But you are going to be able to know that there is a 12-inch antenna available, and it's been available for 2 years. And here they are wanting to put up a 3 foot 1 inch antenna. And we want you to say, hey, use the little antenna. But we want to give you the ability to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sernowski, and then we'll go to the public.
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, Jay hit on the point that I wanted to. Let's get away from BATEA and just what the intent is. Use whatever is the newest, latest, greatest technology to ensure that we're using the smallest, most compact equipment, which the objective is it will be more easily made stealth or aesthetically pleasing. And that's the intent. So let's just get away from BATEA and just say, the provider must use whatever is the most compact equipment, currently, and not using old boxes that are sitting in a warehouse that's cheaper for them to use now than the new technology that's out there. I don't know the best way to say that, but I think we just need to come out and say exactly what our intent is, and not use something that's subjective like Patea.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, I want to go to the members of the public. Mike Strange, keep in mind, Mike, that we've got several of your letters over the past months on this topic, and be aware of time constraints today. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I agree with a lot of the comments with just a couple of notable exceptions with regard to what was stated. The biggest one, as I heard the letter that was read by Glenn from Verizon and from AT&T, Julie Metz, is unfortunately they quoted code which was knocked down by the Ninth Circuit, and so it's obsolete. And what I'm referring to explicitly is their statement that, and I'll read it to make it easier. Patea does not in any way violate local jurisdictions that local jurisdictions do not have authority or expertise to dictate the design of a provider's network and must not restrict the type of services the provider wish to provide. Patea doesn't do that at all, period. It also stays completely within the FCC law as to non-exempted requirements and does not in any way dictate the nature of a provider's network or type of services. It does not inappropriately evaluate or second guess a provider's technology choices, network design, or service objectives. You basically were handed a scare tactic by AT&T and Verizon, and I'm very discouraged that should be done, particularly because they quote the FCC actions which were negated by the Ninth Circuit a year and a half ago, and they're repeating them inappropriately. So I think that's extremely bad. The other thing is, with regard to the comments by Sean and Julie, I agree with the majority of them with a couple of major exceptions. Patea was used predominantly for physical pollution. And in our case, we're predominantly using it for visual pollution. But the conceptual framework is the same, and the policies that you create should be robust and resilient so that it takes into account the things you don't know that you don't know right now. And that's the real challenge. But there are things that we do know. And I gave a very specific example in my January 12th letter, where if we use the criteria that Julie created for us, which was very good, if you applied Patea, what would be installed by the provider would be far smaller. So what we're doing here is we're creating a robust policy that is good for decades and not just for the week or the month. And yes, you do have to stay up to date on the technology, but that's precisely what a consultant does, or in the case of the city, they do right now with multiple consultants in other areas in order to stay up to date on what is currently available. And that's the thing I think all the commissioners were hung up on with regard, how do you stay up to date for things that you don't know about? And that's what Patea is all about as it goes forward. So I think you can do it, and we already have examples of that, and I think Glenn was probably aware of this. Under Chapter 270, under zoning, under 270-5, construal of provisions, higher standards govern. And A says, in interpreting and applying the provisions of this chapter, provisions herein shall be construed to be the minimum requirements for the promotion of the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the city. Well, Patea is a more technical aspect, but as related to small cell implementations and wireless technology, it expresses succinctly what is desired. And therefore, since you don't know what you don't know, and I don't know what the future holds, it creates it in a generic methodology. But just as in other installations and other things related to the building code, there are a multitude of standards that are subsumed within our code, such as UL, BOCA, and NEC regulations. Small cell providers also have to deal with those. But by putting Patea in there explicitly, which is a term of art that is fully understood, it allows you to be up to date all the time. And it doesn't in any way, as was put forth by Ms. Metz, because she quoted the law wrong and it's obsolete, it comports completely with the Ninth Circuit. And that is that restrictions are not preempted if they are reasonable, and very important here, no more burdensome than those applied to other types of infrastructure deployments. Other infrastructure deployments, that includes a whole series of things that have nothing to do with small cells, such as our outfall project is a good example. And they have to be published in advance, and they can be subjective. So I think you're burdening yourselves with a series of assumptions that you don't need to make at this point. And I think by using BATEA as terminology within the ordinance and then referring to the design manual would go a long way to keep it vibrant and useful in the future for things that you don't know right now. So that's really why I pushed so hard for this. And I think Verizon and AT&T, unfortunately, their submittal is pretty much worthless because it refers to things that aren't valid anymore. And why BATEA should stay in there. It does make it, and it's really not that hard, quite frankly. And the important thing is, as in the example that I gave, if we followed the current criteria that was created by CTC, you would have installations that today would be approved, and yet in fact could have been much more visually appealing if you followed BATEA, and are currently available. So that's where my input, and I apologize for taking so long, but I think all of that needed to be stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Walter Brittingham, anything on BATEA?
Good morning. First of all, there's this little slang, he who has the gavel sets the rules. So as much as I appreciated hearing the letter that Glenn read, we didn't hear a rehash of some of Mr. Strange's and maybe Dr. Trejos's comments that actually brought back aesthetics into the discussion. And nowhere do I hear the technical viewpoints of what goes inside of it. So when you install a phone switch, you make sure you have extra ports that you can hook up extra phones. So the critical thing here is the structure and the housing for the antenna. And very quickly, I'll tell you, at Rehoboth Fire Station 2, you see all the black wave guides go up the antenna tower, the structure. And today, what happens, they don't even use them anymore. They drop a piece of fiber optic cable and a power supply in there, and they can run hundreds of frequencies on the same infrastructure, the wave guide, which is sometimes 2 inches. They put a different transmitter down below, and they put what's called a suitcase at the top, and they can run hundreds of things. So I see that the carriers here could put up and have, will, are already doing it. It's just a structure, and they have a sealed box at the top that they can do software changes, and in time, it will be something far different than what they're talking about putting in it today. I've seen them go up. I've talked to the people about it. I have some reasonable understanding. So the most important thing, as Motorola says, get the job. And then you update it as you go along. And I congratulate you for talking about the aesthetics. I think that's where it should be, because I don't think anywhere you're going to be able to put something that when they want to change the frequencies or whatever that they have operating off that pole, I don't think you will have any way of bringing it back to the city. So get the best appearing thing that you can and keep up the good work, because I think you're on the right track. The aesthetics is what you need to attack. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. So I'd like somebody to summarize the next step. And if we want to pursue BATEA, then I'd like to take that to the next meeting and have a formal vote on it. If you're willing to abandon BATEA language and instead seek to achieve the objectives of BATEA, but without using BATEA, as Commissioner Sharnowski indicated before public comment, then if we can get a consensus on that, we have a direction to go forward. Would anybody like to further articulate the next step?
I don't know that we, Commissioner Gossett here, I don't know that we know, that has been commented by Mr. Thompson, what BATEA specifically is. Although from Mr. Strange, he has given us some specifics of what BATIA can control or guide. So I think that, this has all been presented verbally today. And if there is some way that we could obtain those specifics, either that BATIA exists or some form of the information or guidelines with regards to aesthetics that we want in this design guideline could be provided. I know, Julie, you had said that there are still other things being worked on, so I'm not sure what includes that, but I would think that the best available technology, however we define that, whether it's strictly aesthetics or to put it in Mr. Strange's words, we don't know what we don't know, and that some type of guidelines, whether they be BATIA or specific comments about what we want or the aspects of how an application is reviewed and interpreted. I think I brought that up earlier on the aspects of otherwise demonstrate why it is technically infeasible to meet these most preferable designs. And Julie, you said that it was kind of done on a case-by-case basis, but I don't, other than the design zone guidelines, we also have poles and what have you, but could we also include the other aspects of, rusty boxes or colors or those types of things? Again, what we don't know is what we don't know. I just think that we need some type of written material to review to make a decisions on which direction we should select to go. Thank you.
My recollection of Sean's discussion was that if we truly want to pursue BATIA, that could be months and months and months in pursuit. Commissioner Legree?
Yeah, the things that Mike said were great. A lot of really good points. And as Patrick said, we don't know what we don't know. I wonder if the consultant could listen to the stream and Mike, especially Mike Strange, and sit down and see if she could put some points together that would do the things that need to be done because she's the one that deals with the telecommunications companies, not us. She knows she knows what happens and how it works. Maybe she could figure out some things that we could put together that would protect her, fulfill the points that Mike made, and let us go forward without having to have a major rewrite of anything. Maybe I'm just dreaming. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharp?
What I took away from Mike Strange's comments is the phrase, allows us to be up to date at all times. And what I took away from Commissioner Gay's comments was trying to create this so we don't have to go back constantly and update or try to think about things that we currently cannot imagine. So what I'm hearing is that both of them are giving us the pathway forward with our consultant to ask the question, is there a way in the language of what we're working on that we can accomplish those two things, especially in the design guidelines? And I would think it seems very reasonable to me that the potential of, maybe it is only the use of the term BATIA that's certainly throwing me off of why we are impeded from doing the value that I think we can all agree on. The value is always being up to date, not having to go back and try to anticipate something that we don't know about at this time. So how do we do that within the structure of what we're trying to do without using the mayor's term, without, stalling this progress that we've made?
Well, Commissioner Sharp, I think you're very articulate there. I'd like to see that be our marching orders for moving forward. So I'd like to, I think, draw this to a conclusion, use that as marching orders. Julie and Glenn and Sean can get together and see how to achieve these things and present it to them. Now, our next meeting will be determined by when they're able to get not only the corrections or changes to the design manual done, but also incorporating some of your direction in there. Any further comment?
Now, Mayor, does that slow down or prevent any progress on a public hearing at this time?
Maybe, but I think this is too critical and it needs to do go through its course.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Julie. Thank Sean for us. Thanks for your input, Sharon and Glenn. And commissioners also, thanks for your input, Mike Strange and Walter Bringham. We appreciate your comments. With that, I want to remind everybody that immediately following this meeting, workshop meeting, immediately meaning probably after a 5-minute recess, we will have a special meeting addressing parking issues. So stay tuned. Then at 2 o'clock today is another special meeting specific to the budget. So we certainly got a full plate today. With that, I'd like to go to the next item of old business, which is to discuss change of criteria for formation of the Stormwater Utility Task Force. If you recall at our last meeting, we were to make appointments based on city administration criteria, as well as commission approved task force criteria of 5 to 7 members. From what happened at the last meeting, frankly, I was shocked at the response from the majority of the commissioners to my complying with the task force criteria. Most of us have assisted in forming a committee or task force. We voted to confirm or affirm committee or task force membership criteria, number of members, mission statements. We voted to affirm nominations presented. We've appointed some applicants and turned some away in order to manage the number of members. My takes from the last meeting are kind of mixed views here. One is that overall there was a disappointment expressed because some nominees were already serving or had served on other city committees, that we should focus only on new applicants. Interestingly, I had heard that including members that could share their perspective of their committees, Tree and Green Infrastructure, Environment Committee, et cetera, would benefit the task force. That's why I included them. But of the 13 applicants, if I remove all that serve or have served on the city in past, that removes 7 of the 13 applicants. And frankly, my selection of 7 nominees included 4 that have served on other committees that I thought were of value. Another takeaway going forward, I heard that all applicants get a seat on the committees because we cannot turn anyone away. Well, that would mean, of course, that those serving or have served on other committees are now eligible. So, and how are we going to apply this going forward to other committees in the future? Is everybody going to be accepted and nobody turned away? So the actions of the last meeting, in my view, denigrated the authority of the mayor to nominate membership as per the task force criteria approved by the commissioners. The mayor was essentially rendered powerless to do what he was trying to do to follow the task force criteria. So maybe you can understand some of my frustration and confusion, especially when we all had the opportunity to contribute to the task force formation process and criteria to vote and affirm the same. No one came to me and said, hey, Mayor, I've had a change of heart and I don't agree in the criteria anymore. I want to change and increase the number of members and anything. Nobody did that. Instead, it was almost a coup in how it was approached. The committee process, in my view, was sabotaged during that last meeting. So how do we salvage it? Let's reset. And I'm going to open it up to the commissioners determine what criteria you want, and then I hope that we're going to adhere to it. So I open it up to you all.
Mayor Mills, with all due respect, the provocative language that you have just used regarding sabotage, coup, I am astounded that you continue the diatribe from January 21st on this. And I'm not going to play that game. What I would like to do is talk, because you're not going to blatantly accuse me of saying that I had a problem with people from other committees. That is not my position at all. You are not going to get away with saying that because people are friends and neighbors, that's why folks wanted them on the committee, on the task force. So what I would really like to focus on is moving forward in a productive and collegial way, rather than being attacked by the mayor for the second time regarding this, what should have been a very easy, it would have cost nothing in our last discussion to say, well, now that you brought up some ideas that, okay, they were not brought up before the meeting, let me take that under advisement for a minute. And to come back today and say, how can we move this forward? My personal opinion on moving it forward is to believe that, first of all of our constituents in this town are our neighbors, friends, acquaintances, property owners. There's a whole gamut. And if I was honestly astounded that we got a really healthy amount of people that are qualified to serve on this task force based on comments that I have heard over time about what a nightmare sometimes our experiences are when we try to work with and for the city. So my personal opinion is all of these individuals they want to help us. And it would, for me, be a real feather in the city's cap to allow qualified folks who met the requirements, who want to help us to move forward with this group. And that's all I have to say about this.
Anybody else? Commissioner LeGree, unmute yourself.
I agree with Commissioner Sharp. I think we should. I agree with Commissioner Sharp with just about everything she said. And I don't think this is a good path for us to go forward with. I think the thing to do at this point is to erase everything and start forward. And quite honestly, I would be willing to accept every one of the applicants, even the one that's not a stakeholder, even the one that applied 2 or 3 days late, and go forward from there. And that's going to be my suggestion. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, I don't want us to mix up. You said in your intro, you talked about how we form other committees and how we've all, looked at applicants and had to make selections and all that. Remember, this is a task force, which is different in many respects from a committee. First of all, it's a short-term process. We certainly hope it's a short-term process. It's a special focus, and the history of task forces in town are such that this is if you take all 13 people, it'll be one of the smaller task forces, because the Baltimore Wilmington Streetscape is 16. The parking advisory, I went back and looked at that after the meeting, was 11, and the architecture review was 15. So, and I think there were some arguments made January 21st about including more stakeholders because everyone is affected by this. So it really is it's a special, it's different. It's not like committees. And you know, task forces do have different criteria, as we agreed to in the fall of 2020. I went back and looked that up, and there was kind of a separate section of what we agreed to there that related to task forces. But I'll say from my own, there were two things approaching the last discussion of how I approach things. First of all, we never discussed, even though we agreed to that 2-page document, the guidelines that I think came from AECOM, those sort of general guidelines, we never discussed the number. And so in my mind, and I'll apologize if I made a mistake on this, but in my mind, I was reading it as at least 5 to 7 because we wanted to have a goodly number. And the concern at the time was, were we going to get anybody? You know, did anybody really want to talk about stormwater? And as Commissioner Sharp said, we were fortunate to get people to step forward. That's how I read it. I read it at least 5 to 7. Maybe I was wrong. But the other thing was, I felt a little, you know, I hate to use the word blindsided, but I felt a little blindsided when I got the list of appointments the day before and saw a name on there that I had never seen before and knew had not applied. Nothing's personal. To me, and which is why I'm not even going to name who that is, because it doesn't matter. It's not personal. It's just that to me, that's when things kind of changed. So there's, and the other thing I said at the last meeting is they may very well go beyond 6 meetings. And there were a lot of real specifics spelled out in that document about the 6 meetings that will probably change. And so I feel like so much of that document is subject to change that I don't want to hang on a few words and at a disadvantage to the city. I really don't. And so that's why the discussion on January 24th changed my mind based on my consideration from the beginning that we were talking about at least 5 to 7 and the change that occurred the day before that discussion with the additional person. That's it.
Well, my intent here is to, at our next regular meeting, to review all the meeting criteria and vote on it so that we can have a foundation for then going forward, because I don't want to postpone us too much longer. But as I indicated, we need to have a reset here. I've only heard from a few and on what the membership would be. And what I've heard so far is that the membership should be 12, because the mention was all applicants. But that leaves a question mark, because what that leaves is 12 voting members and 1 non-voting member. If you recall the criteria for our committees, they have to be a resident in town or a property owner or a business owner. That's fulfilled by 12 applicants. 1 lives outside the city, but the criteria says if you're not a resident or a property owner or a business owner, then if you have special qualifications, special experiences, which our 13th member does, then they should be allowed to join it. So I'm amenable to all 13, but we still need to resolve this situation of how do we handle 12 voting members versus an odd number, which is part of our committee criteria, if you will. Our policy says we should have an odd number. So I need input on that, whether it's now or at the next meeting when we vote. Is there any other further comment?
Mayor, I would just state also on your issue, and I understand the voting aspect, but it's been my experience as serving on task forces in the past that, there's not that many votes taken. You come to consensus on something in that regards. And also based on schedule, it's relatively rare that all members of the task force show up to participate at those meetings. So there's an aspect that you may have an even number of members attending, no matter how many you appoint and that participate. And I really think that, to look forward and to move forward is the whole reason that we formed task force, is to be able to tap into our local talent and experience. And we shouldn't really limit it to the resource when there's such a deep resource out there of knowledgeable people available to us on this particular subject. I mean, it's a very involved subject, and actually 2 of the applicants have been through this process before in other municipalities, which I think are a great experience that we can add to that. So again, I just think we should look forward and take advantage of all the talent that has come to us and applied to us. Thank you.
Well, I'm rethinking this a little bit, since really the sole issue seems to be the number of applicants and who we select from the 13 that applied. And at least what I've heard so far is all the applicants should have the opportunity to serve on this task force. If you all are amenable, then we can change the criteria and renominate at the next meeting so that we gain a month. Like, any feedback, please?
I mean, I would support that moving forward if you want to revise the criteria, what have you. But again, this is baseline, and things will change. But if this is the baseline criteria of accepting applications as received, whether they're, just a couple after the date or what have you, but as resumes currently on file or applications currently on file, I think if we saw that language, I think that would move forward.
Anybody opposed to putting it on all 13 to be nominated for membership on the task force at the voting February meeting? Anybody object? Well, I think we've sought resolution. Thank you very much. With that, we'll go to the next item of business, which is to discuss the next steps in advancing the Wilmington-Baltimore Avenue Streetscape project. We have certain options to do. We could entirely halt the streetscape project if we wanted to. We could pause it or we could pursue it. But if we decide to move forward, we need to determine the status of our desire to underground the utilities. Some of the options there in undergrounding the utilities, if we want to go forward, are to pursue undergrounding utilizing above ground transformers. This is the same process that was done for the streetscape on Rehoboth Avenue. We could also pursue undergrounding utilizing fully undergrounded vaults in whole or partially throughout the project area. And we could also completely abandon the pursuit of undergrounding. As a support document, we requested input from Delmarva Power, and as of January 7th, we have a letter from Delmarva Power essentially saying that they would not go the route of fully undergrounding, and they gave their explanations. So Kevin Williams, are you on board?
Yes, Mayor.
You want to, if you would, explain what our next step will be in the streetscape project. What have we discussed recently, and how does selecting the route forward on undergrounding impact the design hiring of a city rep?
Well, there was a lot there, Mayor. Let me just start with, as you've seen in the budget presentations, we have in the CIP budget money in there in the upcoming year budget to start with the design of the streetscape. So we put that in as kind of a placeholder so that if the decision is to move forward with that, we can, because our intent would be to go to DelDOT and try to get a grant, and that would be our 20% of design fee for the first phase of whatever we would move forward with the streetscape. However, if the decision is to pursue any or all of the undergrounding, which you mentioned, then we would need to do that prior to starting the design of the streetscape project itself. So that's the need for us now, is to decide what, if any, we want to do with the undergrounding, so then we can fit that into the overall schedule, if you would, for undergrounding, streetscape phasing, and the like. Thus the need for a decision on the undergrounding at this point.
Very good. I personally, I am all in favor of pursuing streetscape, of course. And as far as undergrounding, I don't want to abandon it. I'm mindful that the Wilmington-Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force indicated that the #1 priority for that entire project was the pursuit of undergrounding. In the middle of that discussion, I think it was Mike Strange that indicated a better way to go might be not the above ground transformers of the Rehoboth Avenue Streetscape, but instead to do fully vaulted undergrounding. That means creating an entire underground vault, if you will, that you climb down into, and that would contain all the underground utilities or something. I personally am interested in pursuing the undergrounding with the above ground transformers in the matter of Rehoboth Avenue Streetscape, based on two things. #1 is the letter from Delmarva Power that indicates that they don't or won't do fully undergrounded vaulting. And #2, while we don't have any figures on there, the cost, I have no doubt, would be possibly double. So I think the original cost was for undergrounding, the beginning figure was $9 million. I can imagine it could be double or more to do fully vaulted undergrounding. So there's kind of where I stand with it. Commissioner Legree, please.
Has anybody gotten a second opinion? Florida Power and Light undergrounds their entire state. And I just can't believe that there isn't a way to underground, maybe use vault in some places, maybe 1 or 2 places, everything else above ground where we have room. But what do JMT folks think about the answer that we got from Delmarva? Are they on board with that and say, no, you can't do vaulting? Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. I don't know that we have an answer, a response to that. Kevin, you don't know a response to that, do you?
I don't know JMT's position on it. I mean, our utility provider is Delmarva. If we talking about trying to go somewhere else for another provider, that opens up another whole can of worms.
Another opinion.
From whom
Yes,
would you
but-
like us
but
to
if
get
you-
that opinion? Yeah.
Yeah, seeking another opinion is interesting if you have Delmarva Power that would be doing it and that they refuse to do it. Then what are you going to do?
I think you've created an unsolvable problem. What I would like to do is make I cannot vote for anything except undergrounding. Now, the partial or full is something else again. Just like to make it look as, I'm tired of this junkyard in the sky that we have right now. It would be to make it as aesthetically pleasing as possible. And there's got to be somebody else in this world besides Delmarva Power who knows about undergrounding. And I would like to find out more about that.
But again, Commissioner, respectfully, if you find another agency that says, of course it can be done, it's done in Florida and elsewhere, but you have an agency such as Delmarva Power that says, well, we absolutely won't do it.
Have they said we absolutely will not do it?
According to their letters, they have no interest in pursuing it down here. Kevin, how do you interpret? I think you also talked with them.
Yes, Mayor, and that's certainly the interpretation we have from that we asked them to put it in writing, which they did. So that I think they're pretty firm in their position.
And I would refer you to
But
Jim Smith's.
I'm sorry, Sharon, finish, please.
I would just refer you to Jim Smith's letter. I think he made it clear that that Delmarva was not going to do that here. So we either move forward or we wait, or however you want to handle it, Mayor. All we're concerned about right now is the budget numbers, because we're in the middle of that. That's certainly not all we're concerned about, but that's the main thrust of, where we're coming from behind the scenes.
My desire would be to put this on the voting meeting to see which path you all want to go forward. But what additional information might you need or want prior to that meeting? I don't.
You asking me, Mayor?
Those about underground vaulting to say what's involved. I have read the letter from Delmarva Power. I didn't read it, parse it out. But if that's the final answer, well, then that, and I can't believe that would be, if that's the final answer, then that would determine our vote as far as above ground transformers or vaulted transformers. But I hate to be put in that kind of a position where someone says, well, you can't do it, so we're not going to do it. I think we should do it. We should underground our utilities. May not be able to put everything above or underground, but we should.
Well, you need to Commissioner, you need to clarify a thing. You said, yes, we should put it underground. Are you talking about fully vaulted or above ground transformers like Rehoboth Avenue? There's a very, very big difference there. And there's a very big difference to our pocketbooks.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. My preference would be to put everything underground. You heard that. And if that cannot be done, if we find out that it just cannot be done, and I'm not sure, just having a letter so far from Delmarva Power, I'd have to see. But because they're the people who's looking at the bottom line. And if it cannot be, then the next option would be to go underground with all the utilities.
Right.
Have whatever needs to be above ground, transformers, switches, junctions, whatever needs to be above ground, put them underground, make them as unobtrusive as possible.
Thank you.
That's my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner Gay.
Yeah, I have to admit, I didn't understand totally from the Delmarva if they were talking about vaulted or if they were talking about all underground utilities, and I don't know that we can know that yet. So, I mean, I think overall, I'm very much in favor of continuing on with investigating the streetscape project and with the idea that we would underground to the greatest extent that we can, and move on with the planning, because I don't know that we have enough information yet.
Anybody else? All right, well, we'll kick the can down to the next meeting on this, see if we can find out any more information. Again, we've got a group that says they won't do it. Well, I guess we can go back to them and quiz them on it, but that they won't do it, they won't give us a pricing either. And I think pricing has to be part of the formula, because we can get to the point where we outprice ourselves on this project and it'll never get done. So we'll put this forward. However, I want to go to members of the public first before we end this topic. Mike Strange, do you have anything you'd like to offer?
I don't think he's there.
Looks like he is signed off. Walter, you're still on board. Do you have anything you'd like to offer on streetscape or undergrounding?
I'm an outside contractor for Delmarva Power, and this has been discussed before. Country Club Estates was underground. The transformers were all underground. Some of them, I understand, have been moved above ground, but to have a complete underground system is not practical, and I think it needs to have a discussion. I think if it was done like the streetscape on Rehoboth Avenue, it completely changes the situation. JMT is well versed on it. They were the contractor there. Some of the facilities right down Rehoboth Avenue were not put in correctly. Mayor Cooper could tell you about that. But the way Rehoboth Avenue is done is a sensible way, but it is not completely underground, and it would work. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. With that, that ends the public discussion. Commissioner Sharp, go ahead. You're muted.
Okay. Can you just clarify for me if that, tell me if I have this stated correctly, that it is Cutton is saying no to undergrounding either fully or partially. Is that a yes or a no?
Tony, I'm sorry, you're partially garbled. Just identify who you are asking is saying it can't be fully or partially undergrounded. Is that Delmarva Power?
I think something's going on with my connection.
Yeah, just
it is. I thought what I was hearing. Go, just keep going. Never mind.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I think where you're headed was, is Kevin saying we can't underground or fully underground, or Delmarva Power? Delmarva Power is saying that they, while they will do, my understanding is while they will do undergrounding to the extent that mirrors Rehoboth Avenue, that the answer is yes. Will they do fully vaulted undergrounding? The answer is no.
Okay.
Based on their letter and a conversation Kevin Williams had with Delmarva Power. So let us
okay.
Let us do a little more inquiry, and we'll come back at the voting meeting and see if we're ready to conduct a vote on what the next path forward is. Again, if we're going to underground, as Kevin Williams said earlier, we need to make that determination because some things have to be done before our city representative starts phasing and costing analysis in the future. Anything else? Sorry, Tony, you were just very garbled. Anybody else?
Is it any better?
Yeah.
You want to try again? Go ahead.
Is it any better? The audio?
Maybe. You want to go ahead?
Okay. No, just ignore me. Keep moving.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, that will conclude old business. We've got 2 items of new business. I think we can do fairly quickly. Commissioner Legree is chair of the Beach and Boardwalk Committee. He wants to announce a nomination to fill a vacant seat on the Boardwalk and Beach Committee. Jay?
I would like to nominate Howard Menaker for membership on the Boardwalk and Beach Committee. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, then we'll put that on for a vote at our February regular meeting. With that, we'll go to our second item of new business is discuss proposed amendment to Chapter 215 Restaurants, amending Section 215-5A, that a hearing is required, specifically changing time constraint from 25 days to 30 days. This is just a rather simple change there. Ann, are you on board? Do you want to explain the need to do this? Give her a minute to come on board, if you will. Hello. The explanation for this is with the changing deadlines for newspapers, Ann has found that she needs the extra 5 days to be able to submit notices to the newspaper. If you recall, for permits of compliance, a notice has to be published timely in the newspaper, and the 25 days is just too narrow a window. Also, Ann and I looked in past documents, and this was actually on an agenda approximately, I don't know, several years ago. And it was actually put on for a vote, and then we can't find out in the minutes whatever happened. So I think it passed, maybe, but anyhow, it was not recorded in the minutes, and so we find the need to readdress it. Glenn, did you have anything to offer on this?
Other than, Mayor, I searched my ordinance file and could not find anything where it was actually done. I seem to recall the discussion some years ago, but I could not find any, like you mentioned, I couldn't find any reference, any actual document that effectuated the change.
So this is.
I'm here. I'm here if you have any questions.
Okay, I think we just answered them all. Anybody have a question for Ann? I just explained it, Ann. Thank you very much. I jumped the gun a little bit. If there's no further questions, that will be put on for a vote, simple vote at the February voting meeting. And with that, we go to commissioner announcements and comments. Does anybody have any comments or announcements to make? Hearing none, we'll move on to review future meeting dates. So we have a handful here. Following this workshop, after we recess, we'll probably have a 5-minute recess and resume in a special meeting on parking. That is today. If you're already signed up to speak or you're already on this link, just stay on board because we're not going to stop the meeting and restart. It's just going to continue after we take a short break. Also, February 7th today at 2 p.m., there's a special meeting on the budget meeting number 3, starting about 2 o'clock p.m. February 15th at 9 a.m., there's a special meeting on trees. That'd be tree meeting number 2, somewhat chaired by Commissioner Susan Gay. And then February 18th is a busy day. Also, 9 a.m. is a special meeting on budget meeting number 4. And 2 p.m. on the 18th is our regular mayor and commissioners meeting. With that, are there any further citizen comments? Walter, do you have anything, or Mike? Our Mike's already signed off. Walter, do you have anything further?
Thank you. No, thank you.
All right. Any good of the order of the commissioners? Anything? If not, thank you. Remember, I think we're supposed to stay on. Don't leave the meeting. And maybe mute yourself and stop your video. And let's look at 12:05 to resume meeting. Is that all right? Thank you.
What's the matter?
But that first one was really cracked.
Yeah, and you were frozen.
Y'all are all frozen now on my laptop.
Oh,
And then it completely dropped me.
all right. We'll get them to come in.